Now we will discuss dehydration. Dehydration is the application of heat to remove the moisture from food, and the final product is called as a dehydrated product. The process could be like evaporation, where we use heat to remove the volatiles from food, or in case of freeze drying, there's another um, approach or process which is called as sublimation. The sublimation is basically uh, removal of moisture from a component without the change of phase. For example, if the ice rather is a solid, and if rather than moving to a liquid phase, it is the liquid phase is skipped and it is converted to the gaseous phase. So this happens in case of freezing. That is also used to dehydrate product through sublimation. The process of dehydration is to extend the shelf life of food, because as we said that if we remove the moisture from food, the water activity is reduced, and that would mean that the product would have longer shelf life. There are so many different factors that control the rate at which food is dried. They are basically grouped in three different classes. The factors that are related to the processing conditions. So we have to look at the processing conditions. So there are several factors within processing condition that have to be considered. For example, the relative humidity, the temperature, the equipment, the kind of other factors, variable factors within the environment, and then the things which are related to food, the factors which are related to food, its size, its texture, its nature. So that would also decide the level of heat or the level of effort involved to dehydrate certain food products. And then there are dryer design as well. It has to depend upon the design and efficiency of a dryer. That would also affect the final amount of heat that has to be used in order to dehydrate certain products. Normally, drying is carried out through heat that is given by drying air, which is absorbed by the food, and then there is a latent heat, as we earlier discussed, that the initial heat, sensible heat, is given to the food, and then the latent heat would be removing the moisture from the food in the form of vapors. There are different factors again for this process of dehydration. There are different factors. They can control the capacity of air to remove moisture from the food. The one is water vapor already carried by the air. So if we have a air that is removing moisture from the food, the capacity of that air would depend upon the already present moisture with that air. If the air is dry, it would be of course carrying more moisture away from the food, but if we have air which has got some of the humidity already, it would have reduced capacity to remove the moisture from food. The other thing is air temperature. Of course, the relative humidity of air, this would depend upon temperature. So if we increase the temperature, it might have higher capacity to absorb the moisture within it, so it can remove more moisture from food. Another thing is the amount of air that passes over from the food. So if you have got higher volumes of air that pass above the food surface, that would mean higher amount of moisture that would be removed from the food. So in order to decide different equipments suitable for dehydration for certain foods, we need to consider all these factors that affect the level and rate of dehydration of food, and that also affects the economy of this operation in order to achieve dehydrated foods. Normally, drying is also carried out through heated surfaces, because heated surfaces can also quickly transfer heat in the form of conduction from one surface to another surface, and it happens through the hot surfaces at which the food is normally attached, or it comes in contact with hot surfaces. It would absorb heat from those surfaces. It would help in removal of moisture from the food, and then Normally, this process involves the slurry. The food has to be made in the form of a slurry. It is then spread on these hot surfaces, and then it can be dried quickly. And we normally use steel drums that can have a good capacity to actually heat and transfer heat to the food. There are a variety of different equipments that can be used industrially. They have all have got different capacities and different principles that are involved to actually dehydrate food. They are bin dryers. They resemble bins. Then they are cabinet dryers. They are more like tray dryers. Again, there are another example of tunnel dryers when we have the tunnels of heating medium in which the food through is passed through conveyor belts. Then there might be conveyor dryers when with the food has to be transferred through conveyor belt within the a hot chamber, and that would remove the moisture from the food. We can have fluidized bed dryer in which there is a liquid is passed through a pressure in a narrow orifices, narrow channels, and this would be actually the expansion of this liquid at once would remove or facilitate the removal of moisture in a quicker fashion. Then there can be clean dryers, pneumatic dryers involving vacuums. There could be rotary dryers when dryers are they rotate in a circular fashion. There can be spray dryer when the food is sprayed and then the hot air is actually blown under spraying conditions. That would be removing maximum moistures. Sun and solar drying is I think the most primitive method to dry food when the food is spread under sun or under the solar drying conditions to remove moisture from the food. Other methods are drum dryers where the roller drums are used on which we put the slurried food, and then we can scrape off the dehydrated food and add new food batches into those drum dryers. We can have vacuum band and vacuum shelf dryers. So these are all different examples of different kinds of dryers which are used for dehydration of foods. If we talk about the effect of heat on the food by dehydration, it can affect many things such as texture. It can change the texture drastically. The loss of flavor happens because it is a heating operation. It is normally harsh treatment. This would remove many of the flavor compounds and volatile compounds. Change in color take place because of the caramelization or heat reactions that bring undesirable or sometimes desirable colors within your food, and the nutritional losses are also obvious. So this was about dehydration operation and different types of dehydration and their effect on the food quality.